So, rather inexplicably, I was sent a replay to show you all, so you won't be getting the A team or even the B team for this, you'll be getting the Z team, i.e. me. So there is a reason for my showing this, and that is that there will be some pretty significant mechanical changes coming to the submod pretty soon, and this battle demonstrates some of those in effect, or so I believe, because I haven't actually seen this yet, and I am on high graphics, and I'm taking my life into my hands rather by having it on a setting where the units have more than 3 polygons on them. So we shall see how this goes. Hopefully it doesn't crash, because I do like the game on large, well, better graphics, shall we say. Nonetheless, I'm not actually in this battle, so that's nice for me, because it means I just get to sit back and relax rather than have myself be embarrassed. So let's go through the army, shall we? Now, first of all, we have Harad, played by Kuro, and we have some Abrazanim archers who are... well, I don't actually know the stats off by heart for the new ones yet, but these are fairly elite archers, of course. And Southron archers, and OSGILIATH, of course this is the map we're on, is kind of a strange one, to be honest with you, because most of the time as the defender you can get away with shielding yourself from the attacker's skirmish somewhat, but OSGILIATH, because of the broken down walls on the outside and most of the buildings being hollow, the attacker's archers can be used to greater effect, so I do like archers being picked on this by the attackers. And there is quite a lot of lower tier units, such as the Southron Warband. You have the classical siege tower blockade to somewhat protect them from the archers that will be littering the field with their corpses. We've got some Corsairs as well. Now, Corsairs are not going to do a great deal against some of the more elite infantry of Gondor and Dale, which are the defending factions, but they will do a decent job at pushing things into position at least. More Southron Warband and more Corsairs. So far, quite a lot of lower tier units for Harad, and we do have some Corsair Savages. Now, they may not be the highest tier unit, but I always was a fan of the Corsair Savages, and with a lot of the new mechanical changes, which I will be talking about as the battle progresses, at least with the limited knowledge that I have currently of them, these guys represent what Harad will be about more than anything else, I think, and that is that they are very high attack, pretty quick, but not necessarily the most survivable. And I do like the Corsair Savages for their ability to do decent damage to units above their pay grade, so to speak, but of course their survivability is somewhat in question. They barely wear shirts, let alone armour, so that is a bit of a concern for them. There is also some cavalry over here, which is an interesting pick on this map. If you can worm them into the enemy defence, they'll be pretty decent. Some Southron Lancers and some Mounted Serpent Guard over here. Pretty good. Not the best cavalry in the world, but they will be pretty deadly if they can get into the enemy's defence. And back here we have more of Harad's elite infantry, so we have the Corsair Blackguards. Javelin units will be very good on a siege, of course, and OSGILIATH is no exception, so if you keep these back until the end they will do very well, particularly because of how good they are in melee. And some of the better infantry back here. There's some more, well, there's some Hashari actually, and again, another unit which will be indicative of how Harad play. Not necessarily the most well armoured, but they will do a lot of damage over a short amount of time, and pretty quick. And some slightly more tanky infantry back here in the Serpent Guard. There's some Naru and Aru Royal Archers, which I believe is where the general is, so that will be good, and some Abrazanim and some Trollmen over here. So, you know, pretty standard Harad army, quite a lot of lower tier units, which perhaps won't be so good against the elite infantry that Gondor and Dale have, but some of the units back here will do a pretty decent job. And over here we have Mordor, the second attacking army, and this is Donald Kingslayer. Interesting. So the Temple Inquisitors, I'm led to believe that these guys are going to be extremely good now, one of the better heavy infantry units, so they'll be pushing the siege tower, which is interesting. Orc Band, they will probably not be very good against most things, but they will give a lot of numbers. A lot of cannon fodder. And Uruk Bodyguard, is this where the general is? Hard to say, but I suppose we'll see when the battle starts. Uruk Archers, again, I quite like this because it's not easy to hide from attacking archers within OSGILIATH's somewhat dilapidated structures. And Temple Guard, very good archer unit, big fan of them. Uruks, a lot of Uruks, a lot of Orc Band. Pretty standard Mordor army apart from the higher tier stuff. That is a lot of units. If Gondor had a trebuchet, they could probably reach over here and do a ton of damage, but I don't think they do have one in position. Mountain Trolls, that is a lot of trolls. And is that a troll catapult? No. Just basic mountain trolls. Now, they'll be good for smashing through, but I don't think they'll survive too long against some of the Gondorian pikes. Moving on then, well actually no, I think this is Mordor over here as well, isn't it? A little outside force. Uruk Archers, Númenorian Shield Guard. and Morgul Chosen. This is a slightly more elite force, but I suppose they'll be hanging back for a little while because I don't think they'd want to engage over it. Well, not a lot, but we'll get onto that in a moment. Then the third and final attacking army. Nope, that wasn't good. I should really invest in getting some sort of better camera arrangement for these replays, but this is the first one I've done. We have Isengard. Isengard, good all-round faction they were. The uruk-hai infantry, good unit. Uruk-hai pikemen, and Wardens of Dunland. They seem to be a bit isolated. The defenders, well, hopefully the defenders don't have any cavalry, otherwise this little pocket of troops is going to find themselves in pretty significant trouble if they're not careful. Over here we have some Dunland veterans and some guards of Orthanc, so another smaller force. I suppose these guys will be hanging back, but we'll see in a moment. And then the main bulk of Isengard's force over here, and once again I messed that up somewhat. And we have, Snaga Skirmishers, a personal favourite of mine for their pluckiness. They will actually damage units that are significantly better than them. Berserkers, always a good choice for Isengard because of how much damage they can do. More veterans, uruk-hai crossbows, pikemen, crossbows, infantry. A pretty standard Isengard army as well, to be honest with you. Lots of uruk-hai infantry, crossbows, and pikemen interspersed with disposable Dunlanders and berserkers. So that's the three attacking armies. Now let's have a look at the defenders. I believe the funds were 30k per team, or at least something around to those effects. And Dale, which is Balin, interesting. And we have dismounted earls and barding herd. So it's going to be a difficult. Dale are always going to be difficult to break down simply because of their heavy armor, which is going to be a bit more of a focus for them going forward. And of course their archers. Now the crossbows will be able to do decent damage to the archers, but I think they will have to arc their shots. So interestingly, the archers still will have an advantage over here. The Athala Rangers as well, good high damage units, and the Avari Elder Archers. So technically it's Dale and the Avari and Gondor and Dol Amroth on the defense, and they do have Cav, so we'll get onto that in a moment. More barding herd. So halberds will do a decent job at holding the line in a siege particularly. Good armor piercing, can form spear wall, but perhaps a little vulnerable to a frontal cav charge if you're not careful. They could be forced through it. It's pretty dangerous to do that, but you could do that. And then we have earls over here, which this means that Isengard's outer troops that are sort of spread out are going to be in a little bit of trouble if they're not microed correctly, because they will come and hunt them down. Let's carry on around the outside. Is there more over here for Dale? Let's see. Or is this Gondor? I suppose we'll just lump them in together. They are defending as one after all. No, I think this is Dale. More Swordmasters, a very good unit in Reforged, and I assume they still are. Very high damage, will do a lot of damage to lower tier units. They'll barely be scratched, so they're going to need to be singled out by something a little bit more tanky, I feel. And over here we have more barding herd, so it looks like Dale are taking the outer wall defense, and more over here, whereas Gondor I imagine will be taking the river defense and holding the town centre. Royal Guard and Avari Elder Archers, so this force over here is going to have a real issue trying to get in and around without taking pretty horrific losses. There is a lot of them because it is Mordor. They're nothing if not disposable. There's some more Bardian marksmen here in the town centre as well, but now we'll get on to Gondor, who are holding the central area. Tirith Ea marksmen, a Dol Amroth unit. I do like OSGILIATH. The architecture is very good. And the Tirith Ea marksmen, a little bit more heavily armoured, and they will do a lot of damage to the lightly armoured Harad forces that are coming in from the front. And this is Fountain Guard, of course. This is Timo is leading this one, and the Fountain Guard will not be easily broken down, particularly through a narrow gate like this, and especially not when they're backed up by Wardens of the White Tower and Tirith Ea Wardens. This is a lot of very elite units that you can't really force yourself through without sending your lower tier units routing for the hills. Also some standard Gondor infantry and Swan Knights. Pelagia Marines, I wonder if these guys are acceptable to use yet. They were always finicky, and this has been a problem which has been there since vanilla. Coastal Wardens were always a bit more of a safe bet, but Pelagia Marines are interesting. They're slightly better in melee anyway. Citadel Guard, pretty much all of Gondor's elite infantry is coming out to play here. Citadel Guard, more Pelagia Marines. Some Avari Elder pikemen back here as well, they're very difficult to break down. More Pelagia Marines, more Wardens of the White Tower, more Fountain Guard, my word. Gondor have got a ton of very, very strong units, and of course the Haven Guard. Very, very interesting. Okay, let's begin, and I believe Harad will be the first ones to make their advance. Let's start. I do like these stakes as well. It's a shame they don't go fully under the water. Well, I suppose that would be a bit unfair, but the cav charge would not be real. There will be a small amount of lag, I suppose, while there's so many men on the field, but I suppose we can deal with that. And yes, this is a good example of the see-through buildings, in effect. The Bardian marksmen don't really care that this house is in the way. They are shooting on to the Harad forces. Oh, meanwhile, let's go and check out this cav, which I knew would go for the outer Isengard forces, particularly the ones that don't have pikemen around it. These guards of Orthanc will do decently well against Earls in a sustained fight, but the Earls are going to cycle charge these Dunland veterans pretty nastily. So, oh dear. That crunchy frame rate. But it is nice for once to be able to see something on high quality rather than medium, or low even. These Dunland veterans are not going to respond well to cav charges. I think I will actually drop the graphics a little bit while this siege is going on, if you'll excuse me. Okay, so that should make things a little bit less harsh, although the grass is now just one solid green colour. These cycle charges will continue, and there's not really a great deal they can do about it. The Guards of Orthanc probably won't take a lot of losses, but the Mordor army up there is retreating rather wisely from the archers. Meanwhile, over here, the Harad army is... well, I don't really envy these Southron warband all that much, nor the Corsairs. Send the grubby-faced pirates and the eastern peasants to eat all of the enemy's arrows before sending up your men whose lives are worth something, I suppose. Oh dear. There is more than one way into this area, though. More Tirithea marksmen that I missed during the roll call. But yeah, these Harad forces will be setting up over here. Meanwhile, back in this direction, the cav is still... where is it? Here we are. Well, these Dunland veterans have performed about as well as could be expected. They've taken some significant losses. The Guards of Orthanc are still looking largely healthy. You don't really want to be charging into them, though. The Isengard army seems to be waiting, which is, you know, a good idea. It'll allow you to put some more pressure on when Mordor follow Harad in for maximum effect. These elves are doing a decent job at kiting these units around. And the Dunland veterans are far too far away from the Guards of Orthanc, and they will be charged, but looks like the Guards of Orthanc are going to be charged in the back. That's bold, but it should work. Meanwhile, let's go back over to here, where the real action is taking place, or at least a different type of action. These Southron warband, I'm amazed they're still in the fight. I suppose the yes, indeed, strange Middle Eastern Medieval 2 announcer. Haradrim spearmen as well. This is some hot garbage of infantry, but you know they will take arrows with the best of them. But I do believe that the... yes, indeed, bolder than a rooster. Now then, I do believe that the idea behind a lot of these balance changes is to give each faction their own distinct flavour, because while this is a a relatively new submod to the community, it does also come with the fact that it is still running off a game that was made in 2006. Which does mean that the mechanics of it have become rather predictable over the last decade, and the idea here is to sort of spice things up a little bit. So as I said, Harad will be more focused around attack, perhaps not the most durable units, but they will be that sort of thing, whereas Gondor, shielded units and defense, and each faction will be given their own unique playstyle, more so than they have done in the past, and I like that idea. More variety is always good. And also it will introduce the idea of actually maining a faction, because as it stands, you know, if you know how to play one faction, you can reasonably play them all, really. But now, hopefully, there will be a bit more of a learning curve to each faction individually, which I like the idea of. Of course, Gondor, as it stands, do have Dol Amroth and Gondor, so still a bit of an all-rounder, but moving forward that will change a little bit. I think the Earls are, in fact, moving back. Let's see, it looks like Isengard are sending just their ram up, which is a highly questionable decision, because this unit is just going to get mulched by Earls. Really should have waited. But they have actually managed to get this force over here to escape, relatively anyway. That unit of Earls will be waiting for them again, though. Harad, meanwhile, this unit of Corsairs is right in the firing line for his party and marksmen, but they seem to be waiting for the more elite... Oh, Walk Band have arrived. I don't blame them for waiting for the more elite infantry, because some of Mordor's very high tier stuff is very nasty. Meanwhile, I think he's sending his spearmen back down off the siege tower. They didn't really fancy a fight against the Swan Knights, which I don't blame them. Wooden armour is all well and good when you're fighting up against militia, but it's not so good when you're fighting up against Dol Amroth's finest. This gate is very small. It's a very interesting choke point. This is only Gondor infantry here, though, and they are through the gate. That sweet wood texture. This is only Gondor infantry here. They could actually send some up this siege tower if they have a slightly better unit, but well, it's very highly depleted units that they've got waiting around here. Are they going to charge into the welcoming arms of the Fountain Guard, or are they just going to stand here? Looks like they're going to just stand there. These Fountain Guard are very eagerly awaiting the advance of that wall. Well, the Haradrim Spearmen are not really going to get much done against the Fountain Guard, so I can't say I blame him. Isengard is making a move now, though. Making a somewhat more concerted effort. Meanwhile, these Dunland veterans are basically in front of the firing squad because Dale's Archers, of course. Dale's Archers will be a bit more of a focus for the faction now, especially when the Avari are taken away from them. The Avari Elder Pikemen, very, very strong unit. And a mine. Interesting, I missed that. But they will be able to punch another hole in the wall, which will be very, very good for them, because Dale's infantry is somewhat thinner over here than Gondor's is at that central gate. Although they will still struggle to get through the Barding Herd and the Earls quickly, unless they send their Berserkers forward. And they're going to have to be careful of these Earls. This secondary Isengard force is going to be joined by that Mordor army as well, which is good. Focused attacks. Spread out but focused. Now they're making their move, and Uruks are going up first, which is not a bad choice because they won't fold like wet tissue paper. And these Mountain Trolls have charged up the siege tower, and that's a good choice as well because the Swan Knights will probably win this fight, but shock infantry they are not, so the Mountain Trolls will actually do a decent amount of damage to them. They are falling pretty quickly though. They do need to reinforce them rather quickly, with more Trolls even, so that's interesting. The Haven Guard would butcher these Trolls, I believe, but meanwhile this Gondor... I perhaps would have sent the Trolls against the Gondor infantry, if I'm being honest, because they would have certainly done a lot more damage, and then just occupy the Swan Knights with some garbage. But to each his own. I'm not even as good as the players who are playing this game, so I don't know why I'm going around giving out tips. But the Isengard forces have broken through their gate. The Earls are menacingly circling around the Isengard main army. Those crossbows are going to be singled out if they're not careful. More Barding Herd. This is a very compact line, and the mine is going to be key here, although I would have actually done it... Well, actually no, that's a building, so I guess I can't do it on this one. Well, there goes the wall. I hope he didn't... Did that even break it? Yes, it did. Okay. He actually killed some of his own Dunland veterans along with that, but he does now have two ways in, which is good, because it means he won't have to deal with this ball of death that awaits him there. He'll have a slightly more spread out ball of death instead. And that wall crumbling has tanks the frame rate. Let's see. Yeah, 240 Corsairs. A lot of low tier trash waiting for their chance to attack. Are these savages? Yes, they are. They'll trade relatively efficiently with the Swan Knights, provided they're immediately followed through with something that can make it stick. I don't think the Corsairs are going to be that. Meanwhile, over here, the sea of garbage that is fighting against the Fountain Guard is not going to get very far. Orc Band and Haradrim Spears will not do particularly well against Fountain Guard in a choke point like this. The Fountain Guard's armor piercing won't be doing much, but, like, you know, that's not really a factor here. More Uruks. Uruks not quite as good as Gondor Infantry. Gondor Infantry pretty good now that Gondor have got a focus on shielded units, particularly in a defensive situation like this. These Uruks seem to be none too eager to advance. I can't say I blame them, standing there gormlessly staring into Osgiliath proper. Still, things progress. Here come the Corsair Savages. Now they won't beat the Swan Knights, but they will do some damage to them, provided they all attack, rather than just this sort of one at a time approach that they seem to be doing now. No love lost between Harad and Gondor. Meanwhile, Isengard making a decent push. Over here, the Snaga Skirmishers. Now this is a very good idea, because the Snaga Skirmishers will efficiently deal with stuff like the Earls, and this unit of dismounted Earls has been taken down to size relatively well. Uruk-hai infantry, not a bad choice to send forward first, but here come the Berserkers, and the Berserkers will do a good amount of damage. They will cleave through the armour of Dale, which is really one of their main selling points, and now they have been drawn into an area where the Snaga Skirmishers can once again fire at them, so pretty good. Isengard started off struggling rather against the mounted Earls, but they are making inroads, at least cost-effective inroads, into the Dale line, although there is a lot of dead bodies here, which is rather unfortunate. They do need to be careful that their army doesn't rout. Meanwhile, the Berserkers are dropping rather quickly because they're being forced out. They're not being backed up with anything. They need to be backed up by a unit of pikes, ideally. So that's going to progress. The Dale archers are going to just be continually shooting in here, and exposing your pikemen to the archers is not really the way to do things. Pikes can't really block arrows, but over here there is a lot of units over here, and there is another gate that is going down. There is another unit of Fountain Guard, however. Gondor certainly didn't bring their budget units over here. Well, actually, this Fountain Guard unit there's a troll just stood over here. I guess he's had enough of fighting and he's contemplating the horrors of war as he stares at the Tirithea Wardens. Meanwhile, the Fountain Guard defeat does seem certain for them now that the Uruk Bodyguard have got into the action. And the Bodyguard units are pretty effective, so perhaps, I suppose it's cost efficient to just leave them be for the time being and then send in the Tirithea Wardens when the time comes that they get a little bit more depleted. The Pelagia Marines are ready though, and as soon as they flood in here, those javelins are going to... Well, okay. Good for you. And I am using the in-game audio, which does mean I'll probably get a copyright thing, but it doesn't really matter because I'm a small fry, so they don't tend to bother with people like me, which is good, because it means I can be lazy and not get my own music. Meanwhile, these Corsair Blackguards, interesting to use them now. Meanwhile, this rain of javelins will do a decent amount of damage to the Wardens of the White Tower. It's a good target to use them on. Now, I'm not too convinced I'd have used them just yet. Corsair Blackguards always did have limited ammunition, and I'm not sure whether that's still the case in the shiny new version of the submod, but hopefully that will not come back to bite him. It does look like they are out of ammo, but they are pretty good in melee as well, so he's going for a sort of overwhelm the enemy approach here, which will work, especially when the Corsair Savages do their damage, and then they're reinforced by this sort of slightly more tanky Serpent Guard. That'll do a decent job. There are some Corsairs in here. That's interesting. Meanwhile, up here, the Swan Knights butchered the Savages to the last man. Siege Tower mechanics not really helping them there. Meanwhile, here in this... the Haven Guard came to kill the trolls. No wonder that one troll was down there looking all forlorn.
Fools! Do they think that just by destroying our siege towers they will know victory?
Interesting. There goes the Siege Tower. Meanwhile, up here on this veranda, Gondor have very much been victorious. Gondor is going well for them at the moment. They're very cost-effectively dealing with their foe. Back over here, though, with Dale, there were a few more issues. Although it does look like they managed to weather the storm with the Berserkers and the Skirmishers, although they won't do it like that. Going on the offensive with a single unit of Barding Herd. Meanwhile, over here, the third avenue of attack has begun. Over here, where the Swordmasters were. And uruk-hai infantry is perhaps not the best choice to use against swordmen. I've done nothing but complain about my opponent's tactical prowess. Whenever I play a battle, it usually goes out the window pretty quickly and I just throw my men in as well. Especially when I'm on the attack, so I apologise for my criticisms, but yes, the Earls are going to be facing Dunland, or Wardens of Dunland. The Wardens of Dunland will probably do pretty well against the Earls with their armour-piercing axes. Meanwhile, the uruk-hai infantry are making a pretty big blob for themselves up here, but they will be taking some substantial losses from the Dale Swordmasters. Doesn't look like they've got a ram over here. And there is some Barding Herd and Bardian Marksmen ready to help them. The Avari archers and the Royal archers went over to the main Isengard army. The cavalry's still running around out here, but there's a lot of spears out here now, including Numenorian Shield Guard and Morgul Chosen. So the elves don't really want any of that. They're going to struggle to get cost-effective charges done, but maybe I just missed them. Okay, let's go back to the main area. Oh, looks like the Tirithea Wardens have been committed, which must mean the Fountain Guard were faltering. They're still there, but, well, victory seems certain for them now, so the reinforcements have worked, and there's Haven Guard. This is a very unenviable task. There are two armies, but Gondor, this is really what they excel at. And the Uruks are not really going to cut the mustard here. This sort of attrition-based warfare may well pay dividends in the end, though. Over here, they are having much more success with the overwhelming tactics. Defeat is a distinct possibility now, and I think they can flank around. I don't know if you can go under this. Osgiliath's a very weird map, and it's hollow buildings and certain pathways you cannot take. I'm assuming you can't go under there, because I'm pretty sure they would have already. This unit of Swan Knights should probably get down off the wall at this point, and just sort of try and flank around, because otherwise they run the risk of getting surrounded even up on this wall. So, well, I suppose they're doomed either way, to be honest with you. There's a lot of archers and a lot of javelins ready there, so they're going to be taking significant losses. Uruk-halberds. I hope the Uruk-halberds got better. I think they were one of the units which got left behind in a few of the patches, so now hopefully they will be back to what they were, which is a cost-effective unit. Most of the time, anyway. They will be here, certainly, when they're backed up by elite things, especially in the wake of something more damaging like Corsair Savages. Yeah, let's have a look over here again. Oh my. There is a lot of dead things. There is a lot of dead Avari. What's going on? Those are dead Avari archers. What on earth happened? Well, clearly I missed something rather profound, because he charged his archers out into Berserkers, which is it's an interesting move. I mean, he's really going on the offensive here. That's really gutsy. And he's honestly not doing too bad. Well, I say that, his units are mostly broken and fighting to the death, but he does have a unit of Elder Pikemen. Although, the likes of these Snaga Skirmishers and the uruk-hai crossbows will get through a unit of static pikemen. This is interesting. Maybe this was a sort of delaying tactic to allow him to get another line of defence in. Well, over here the Bardian Marksmen have taken some losses, I assume to the crossbows. And the Athala Rangers are much the same. Okay, let's go back over to Avenue number 3, shall we? Barding Herd. On a map like Osgiliath, I usually give the advantage to the attackers, because the fortress doesn't really do the defenders as many favours as several other packs. Especially themed maps like this one. They usually give the defenders quite a lot of breathing space, in the sense that they have very effective choke points. But Osgiliath is quite different to that. It's very open, and the walls and the buildings offer you a lot less protection than many other maps. So the defenders have it all to do, although they do have a lot of good units. The outer fights are progressing reasonably well for the attackers. Isengard will probably be victorious over on the other gate. Over here, Dale are doing a little better, but Mordor's more elite units over here haven't been committed yet. These elves are making it more difficult for them to be committed, but as long as they keep these pikes in front of the ladders, they will eventually be able to get up there. And then they will probably be able to force their way through after the attrition. Over here, on the other hand, Isengard need to get into the walls as quickly as they can, because over here, let's see, well, there goes the Dale general, slain at the hands of, slain at the hands of the Hashari. Defeat seems certain for the Hashari though. Well, that's the Royal Guard, so it is an archer unit. Hashari, high damage, and Corsair, so you can go through here, interesting. Those Haven Guard are going to hack their way through most anything, individually at least, that Harad can throw at them. After a bit of attrition though, something like the Abrazanim should be able to do that. Meanwhile, this gate over here, they've been halted in their tracks, really. Up here, I can see why they're holding their ground, but I'm not sure. They seem to be losing significant ground over here, and the more of the castle they lose, the more open to flanking they become. There is some significantly good infantry for Gondor still in play. This Citadel Guard will not be easy to break down. There is some Uruk halberds. Defeat is a certainty. The skirmishes for the defenders become all important at this point. There's still some very good infantry in reserve for Gondor. Dale, on the other hand, is really fully committed to two fronts. And over here, they are struggling. They have one unit of Bardian marksmen essentially holding back the horde at the gate. I wonder if these Snaga have got any ammunition left. My guess would be no, considering how many of Dale's men over here are dead. And javelins are very, very effective at close range. This Bardian marksman is holding remarkably well against the unit of Berserkers. I'm surprised they haven't given up, and they're eager and fresh. Berserkers sort of, they cause fear, so I'm surprised that they're eager, but I imagine that won't be lasting very long. They are, after all, losing. Meanwhile, over here, things are going slightly better for Dale. They have actually thrown off the attack. And I suppose you can thank their cavalry for that, because it's still being annoying. And they are... this is interesting. They're trying to worm their way behind the pikemen and get a rear charge, which would be very, very good. It would certainly inhibit the Mordor players' reserves from getting in, which at this point they do need, because otherwise this Dale force is going to retreat and relieve the other two fronts which are struggling. And yet, they are not going to notice.
Fools! Do they think that just by destroying our siege
There we go,
towers
another
they
siege
will
tower
know
died.
victory?
Victory is a distinct possibility for them with their pikes, but well, that charge was maybe a little lackluster. And now they need to rapidly get out of melee, because oh dear, the rear charge was not as effective as one might think, and that unit of Earls is very rapidly finding itself dead. That's unfortunate for them, but they're still winning on that front, which is good because over here they don't have much left. Some Snaga skirmishers taking on the Barding herd. So the Snaga are out of ammo and they're being used as cannon fodder, unsurprisingly. But this Avari Elder pikeman has taken significant losses. Let's go back to the middle because this is where the attackers are having quite a lot of joy at this point. They've made a lot of ground. This unit of Swan Knights still up there. The reinforcements coming over from here have certainly helped because they are going to win this fight fairly comfortably, even with the Abdul Zanin there. The Haven Guard and the Wardens of the White Tower are very, very good indeed. The archers are firing, but I'm not sure they've got the best shot, to be honest with you. The Naru and Aru are very good archers as well. This cavalry will be interesting. As soon as they break the lines, this is really the incentive for the defenders to hold and not fall back, because otherwise the cavalry is just going to charge into them. They can't afford any careless losses. What's this unit back here? Is this the Temple Guard? No, it's just a unit of Uruk archers. So where are the Temple Guard and Temple Inquisitors then? Well, there's the Temple Guard. Oh, there's some Nazgul as well that must have been in the blob. And there's the Temple Inquisitors. Oh my, their siege tower got destroyed. Well, now I would certainly get these guys off the wall because I don't think the attackers are going to be doing that. They're going to try and force their way in through the front, which over here they're still not having any joy. But with the Temple Inquisitors and Temple Guard they probably will because they're steadily losing their complete control over the gate. They are starting to spill out. Critical mass being reached. Now the cavalry are in. They can't really get any decent charges off though. Can they go through here? I mean, I can't see why they shouldn't be able to go through there. They should certainly charge the Pelagia Marines because they will crumble beneath a good cav charge. The Citadel Guard, on the other hand, will certainly not crumble to a good cav charge, especially from the front when they're braced. But it looks like they don't even need to charge these Pelagia Marines because the Berserkers will do that for them. Everyone likes the Berserkers. There's nothing more practical than a sword that looks like it's got two picks on the end. Well, they are taking arrow fire, and they don't look like they'd be the best against arrow fire with their light armor, but they, you know, you hit them and you just make them more angry, so... Well, there go Isengard. There's some drips and drabs of depleted infantry that they're sending in first. They're very bloody guards of Orthanc. They'll at least hold up to arrow fire a little better though, although maybe not considering how wounded they look. Over here, it's... well, they're actually starting to lose the attackers over here now. That's interesting. Well, I suppose the javelin fire is not helping, particularly into the Naru, who I assume are the general unit for Harad. But yes, this defense is holding pretty firm now. It was looking a bit dicey on this front, but the attack is slowly running out of steam. I suppose that's why he charged in his... And now here comes a bit of relief. which they do need because the Isengard player has made decent inroads. They are now in the fortress, and as soon as you're in, things get more difficult, especially in Osgiliath. The choke points are pretty wide, and there's quite a lot of avenues to get around the defence. Not the easiest fortress to defend, but they do have Barding Herd, and that will be effective against a lot of what Isengard have, because they do rely on their half-decent armour. Obviously not their Berserkers, but their standard mainline do. Númenorian Shield Guard against Dale Swordmasters, who have been in combat before. This should be interesting. The Númenorian Shield Guard should win it, because they're fresh, and not damaged, and also very elite. But the Dale Swordmasters should do quite a lot of damage to spears, Uruk archers, and Morgul Chosen. Morgul Chosen are not quite as good as Númenorian Shield Guard, but they are still pretty effective. Perhaps not against Earls, though. Bardian Marksmen, high armour archer units, good for clogging up the enemy. Okay, let's go back over to the main front, shall we? There are still some Swan Knights up here, which I would move. They're not really doing much up there. It looks like they are moving, in fact, so it doesn't matter. Right, they have contained this avenue of attack relatively well. There are still Nazgul back there, though, and Nazgul will effectively deal with most of what they have here. In fact, I think everything, because they no longer have any Fountain Guard. At least I don't think so. There might be one or two. Yes, there is. There is still a couple. There's 57 in there. What on earth? Where are their glorious helms? Unless they're just sort of spread all around the battle and things have descended into barely organised chaos, which is entirely possible. Over here, the attack is stuttering. You know things are bad when the Southron archers have been committed to melee against stuff like Citadel Guard. That's a rather desperate situation, I fear. Interesting, the Uruk archers are also being deployed, although the numbers that the attackers possess is still pretty scary. Let's have a look. Well, the percentage of the attackers being killed is 6% more, but the defenders will start to kill less and less as the battle goes on. That's how it works, so they really need to keep hold of that advantage for as long as they can. Meanwhile, over here, these poor Avari Elder Pikemen, such a good unit, which seemingly were killed and singled out very effectively. That's the problem with having such a good unit. It becomes a magnet for all sorts of skirmish fire. And there are still some javelins available. There is one Tirithea marksman in melee against the Snaga. The Snaga will take a long time killing him, but he will die eventually. Guards of the Orthanc against Tirithea marksman and Pelagia Marines. They should win that, but they are bloody. Ah, pikemen, the mainstay of Isengard, and these Dale Swordmasters, who were valiantly trying to hold back the hordes, have found themselves in a fight that they aren't really designed for. Now let's have a look at Avenue 3 again, because breaking through here at this point would be catastrophic for the defenders, I feel, because it would give them too many areas to be flanked by the attackers, which ironically is just what the attackers need, so this may very well be where the battle is won or lost at this point. I do think they have the reserves to hold back the Isengard main army, but not here if it falls, and the Númenorian Shield Guard. Well, things have evened out a little bit here. I suppose the Dale Swordmasters are a bit too attack focused for the Númenorian Shield Guard. I don't know whether the pikemen on the walls are not going to be particularly fantastic, but over here the Morgul Chosen are still losing. Interesting. Very close indeed over there, and that may very well be where it is all won or lost. Haven Guard, that's an important unit to have. Citadel Guard, another source of battle over here. These crossbows have been charged by Earls, which is bad because that crossbow force could have been very good on the flank, but not when it's been charged by cavalry. This defensive line still holds strong, although the spears at the front are really what gives it its rigidity. As soon as these Pelagia Marines get to the front, it will become a lot less stable. Over here is where Harad's elite infantry is. The Abrazanim Nabuzagar are still fighting. There isn't well, the Haven Guard appear to have been largely dealt with, and the Temple Inquisitors are over here now, which means I would back the forces of evil to start winning this fight in a hurry. The Abrazanim and the Temple Inquisitors both are effective units indeed. Trying to back it up with Gondor infantry, that won't really plug the gap, I don't think. So again, the attackers are in a little bit of trouble. Over here, it looks like the attackers are trying to push out. which is bold because that will give the cavalry a good charge on you. There's the Temple Guard. The archer variety not quite as good in melee, but they're still no slouches. They're probably better than the standard uruks. But this is interesting from the attackers. Chasing them out too far will put you in danger of the cavalry, which has been largely inert so far, but the threat of it is often all that it takes to decide your enemy's playstyle. That Citadel Guard is being shot by arrows. Here we seem to have a slogfest, which is very steadily progressing backwards, so the attackers are getting what they want, but the losses may be a bit too much. Meanwhile, Isengard are steadily winning over here. This defensive line is thinning, and that's a lot of dead Pelargir Marines. It doesn't look like they have any Berserkers left, mind you, and if I'm honest, it doesn't look like Isengard's army has got a lot of muscle left to it. There's some uruk-hai crossbows, more uruk-hai crossbows, some earls, more crossbows, and a unit of pikemen. So this is mostly skirmishers, which is potentially good if they can break through and surround the enemy, but if they need to commit them to melee, this isn't going to be the punch that they were looking for, I don't think. So once again we have to go back to Avenue 3, where the defenders really should need to win this at this point, I feel. And it does look like the Dale Swordmasters are actually going to beat the Numenorean Shield Guard, so I was wrong. Interesting. It happens far more often than I would like. Dale Swordmasters, real beasts in melee, and they are going to win this battle for them, I believe, because the Morgul Chosen are losing this fight over here as well. So this unit of pikes and archers will be standing out here with their thumbs up their asses, to be honest with you. They're not really going to be able to get much done. And then they will have a relief force, which they are going to badly need to hold back the largely skirmish contingent of Isengard, lest it flank them. This Haven Guard is still waiting. This is a very close fight indeed. But it does. The attackers have now pulled ahead in terms of percentage killed. It's whether or not the defenders have held back their right units. The Stale Swordmasters will come back when it gets to the town centre, so that's an important unit that will come back, because they are nasty. These archers are in melee. The Citadel Guard are becoming tired, but I don't think this force is going to break through. This force is really just here to sort of engage the front line. It's over here where the attackers are really doing some damage. The Temple Inquisitors have only lost 6 since the battle started, I believe. And Gondor infantry is going to be insufficient to kill them. There are some Barding Herd in here which will be slightly better, maybe. But I'm still not altogether convinced that they will get anything significant done. And the attackers have fallen back into the gate, which is a good idea, because yes, the cavalry is indeed charging into them, which is giving the cavalry all of the impetus they need, giving them that cost efficiency. And this Southron Lancer unit. Southron Lancers, you know, a relatively low tier of cavalry compared to some others, but here it doesn't need to be overly strong. It just needs to be able to charge into the enemy and cause problems, which they are doing, and the attackers, I believe, do have the upper hand at this point. There are simply too many leaks for the defenders to plug, and they don't have enough men to do so, I don't believe, especially with this pikeman unit. Although this Haven Guard is going to have to deploy itself now. They can't wait in reserve now, because otherwise this pike unit is going to cause perhaps 2 front lines to break. This unit of Citadel Guard has been committed. Defeat seems certain for them because of the Snaga. The Snaga skirmishers really proving themselves to be a very good investment indeed. And here come the Haven Guard. They're taking a few crossbow bolts, it looks like, but they are still fully intact. And with horns made of clay. Classic. And this Haven Guard will charge into the backs of these uruk-hai pikes. They did turn around in a hurry, but the uruk-hai pikemen will fall very quickly to the Haven Guard. They're pretty dependent on their armour to remain solid, and the Haven Guard cut through that like cheese. So, and over here even the attackers are starting to wear down the line. So it does look like on all fronts the attackers are starting to win, other than front number 3. So Temple Inquisitors and Uruk Archers and Gondor Infantry. Let's see here. Over here the defenders are still winning, but the Temple Guard will probably be able to force their way through the exhausted Fountain Guard at this point, especially when they're backed up by a bunch of garbage. Where'd the cavalry go? There was Haradrim cavalry somewhere. Ah, here we are. And yes, the front line for the defenders is crumbling. And the cavalry is now running rampant, and this is where the cavalry will really come into its own. And I believe this will be the death knell for the defenders. I don't think they'll be able to come back from this, unless they've got some sort of pike unit hidden away somewhere that I haven't been paying attention to. A unit of 10 Dale Swordsmasters will not be enough to swing this fight. Into the backs of those Fountain Guard, and with the Temple Guard right in front of them, they will start to... oh, they're wavering. It's not often you see the Fountain Guard waver, but they still didn't break, even in the face of this adversity. Is a mighty unit indeed. The Haven Guard, ultimately, still one of the scariest units to fight, simply because of how much damage it can do so quickly. And Dol Amroth certainly have a powerful unit there when they get split off. Gondor themselves, though, I will say that I was impressed with how Gondor's units held, as they should have, because Gondor are a defensive-minded faction, or at least they will be, when they are their own thing. Over here, I think, ultimately, in hindsight, was where the attackers actually won this battle, because they were able to overrun the Dale defence relatively well, and even with a few early missteps. So Isengard really can claim a lot of credit for buckling that defence. Also Harad, I feel, the way they led the attack in through the middle unflinchingly, despite taking some pretty horrendous losses early on, as you can see from the piles of bodies that were practically 3 deep, that they did a relatively good job at forcing Gondor back, and ultimately I think the numbers were what was working against the defenders here. The quality was certainly not in question, but I think on a more defensible fortress they would have fared slightly better. But Osgiliath is difficult to defend, as was demonstrated. The defending archers were picked apart rather by the crossbows on the outer walls, and the choke points. There are so many ways around. There goes the Isengard general. That's 2 generals gone, so that means it's just the Mordor general and the... actually no, that's it, isn't it? Or is the Gondor general still alive? I've lost track of him. I don't believe so. The Mordor general's still alive. I imagine he's in the Nazgul, which is not going to fall, I don't believe, anymore. There's not going to be any units capable of killing the Nazgul. And even here we have the Tirith Ea marksman, still holding the line valiantly against the cavalry, but cavalry is really built for killing archers, and this will be it, I fear. Still some Avari Elder Pikemen. I'm not sure if they actually did anything other than get singled out. Maybe I missed their glorious stand, but this was a unit that very much could have halted Isengard had it been deployed earlier, I think. If it was within the Barding herd and helping to hold one of the choke points that Isengard opened up, be that the gate or the hole in the wall, they would have fared slightly better. At least they would have held for longer, and I think that would have helped, certainly on this front. It's difficult. The divide and conquer tactics used by the attackers were very well done, especially on a map that's as open as this one. So many winding streets, so many opportunities to surround and kill, and now for the last stand of the Gondorians. Well, there goes the Gondorian general, and well, they aren't fighting without their head, particularly because a lot of them are routing. In fact, that might be all of them routing. I don't know if Gondor have got any unbreakable units. The Haven Guard are fighting to the death at the very least.
Wisest one, we have lost control of the castle.
Interesting. So they have retreated from the castle. Essentially, the reason the balance of power is still showing any blue at all is because of this fight over here, which the defenders did win. Well, kind of. The pikemen are on the wall now, which is an interesting one. Pikemen. Well, player has admitted defeat, so I believe this is indeed the end. But the defenders did at least achieve victory here on Avenue 3 of attack. But on Avenue 2 and 1, unfortunately, they were overwhelmed a bit. Impressive, though. Impressive. Again, as far as the mechanics of the mod goes, that That doesn't really show a whole lot because, of course, you know, it's a battle replay and you don't see the stats floating above the units' heads. But it does give an idea of how things will go. So Mordor, obviously, lots of numbers with a few very elite units mixed in there to give them their core. Isengard, of course, pretty good all-rounders with some high damage units, but mostly it's all about a uniform force that can be padded out with some more expendable Dunlanders. And of course the Snarga's MVPs. And then you have Dale, which, you know, slightly more armoured, very good at survival, a bit more archer focused than Gondor, which is where they differ a little bit. Yes, interesting. These Southron Lancers are very eager to get up onto that wall, but they can't, really. They're just going to have to wait until the Dale units bleed, I suppose. We have more units heading over here. The crossbows should finally be what it takes. Well, certainly the skirmishers. These swordmasters, though, have held for a very, very long time. And that is exceedingly impressive. Very bloodied up, though. I mean, they haven't lost many men in their unit either, so... Well, now they're going to start losing quite a few, because the javelins are going to start taking their toll somewhat. Especially seeing as they have nowhere to run unless they want to jump off the wall to their doom. Uruk archers. So the forces of darkness have indeed recaptured Osgiliath. So poor old Faramir is going to have to make his suicide run after all. Now here go the Nazgul. They're not on their fell beasts. They've decided to get dirty down on the streets with the troops. I don't know, like the well, I suppose one of these could be the general. It's hard to tell. I believe the Mordor general model is actually a Nazgul. But I wonder at some point if it's going to become the Witch King of Angmar, or if he's going to go to a different faction. The Nazgul look pretty bloody, actually, which is interesting. Although those Tirathea marksmen are not going to last very long against the Nazgul. Over here, yep, everywhere is victorious. So this is the last fight. Are they going to rout is the big question. Yes, they are. And they are wavering. They're warmed up though. They don't feel in the least bit tired for their exertions, despite the fact they've been fighting for about 30 minutes. Well, they're routing now, so that is it, I believe. I think that's every one of the defending units broken, which should mean the end. 99%. That was relatively close, though. Really, it was towards the end where it started spiraling out of control, but that's how sieges often go. Winning the battle? Wait a minute, how did they get one of their units return? How odd. But yes, I believe that it was difficult for them. Osgiliath is not the easiest fortress to defend due to its sheer size and how open it is. But they did a good job at defending, really. Especially the Gondorian defence in the middle. I think the Dale player had a bit more of a task on his hand, considering that he had to cover a much wider area. Nonetheless, a decent effort. What's going on over here? Oh, I see, these elves are fighting to the death. Well, let's speed this up a little bit, shall we? Fighting to the death. Oh.
Victory is well within our grasp.
No, victory is within your grasp. Not you have victory. There we go.
Let victory be a salve upon our wounds well earned.
A salve upon your wounds well earned. Indeed, because there are a lot of wounds and a lot of corpses. Now then, let's have a look here. So the Gondorian player had a lot of kills. He had ready-made choke points for him, and the Gondorians do very well in such a situation. It's hard to say whether they would have won had they not been flanked, because they started to leak a little bit. The Isengard player did very well, I feel. I think that the Isengard player was the reason why the attackers started to run away with it towards the end. The Harad army got quite a few kills. The Mordor player was further back, mainly because he had to follow Harad in for the most part, and Isengard, so he was like the final blow. Then the Dale player had the unenviable task of fighting a two-front war and trying to cover multiple choke points. Let's have a look here. Oh yes, I can... well, hold on. Well, here's the stats of the Harad player at least, Kuro. Let's see. Well, the Corsair Blackguard's got a lot of kills for a relatively limited amount of time. The Hashari, that's a very impressive kill count. So it is really indicative of what Harad are going to be all about. Hashari type units. How did the cavalry do? Where are we? I'm stupid, I can't. There we are, right. Southron Lancers, Southern Guard, decent amount. They only really got used towards the end, so that's to be expected, I suppose. But that was a good one, and I do like OSGILIATH. I don't know if I'll list this as a scenario, because it's really just a standard siege, but there is another one. The other battle is a free-for-all that I got sent, and a free-for-all will probably showcase the different factions' playstyles a little bit more than a siege, but unfortunately I hear it did crash towards the end, so I will still show it because it's more useful than the simple 1v1s in an older build that I've been showing more recently. So that's something to look forward to, and I hope that me doing it is not such a drag and not one of the more well-known people, but hey, I guess they were ill or away or something, so you got me instead. So apologies for that, but here it is, and people have been asking for a replay rather than just a live battle, so at least I can provide that. And I hope you will join me for the free-for-all as well, so that should be quite interesting to watch, and I hope to see you there.